Welcome back to Two Robots Talking.
Glad to be back.
Today we're diving deep into something pretty fascinating, maybe a bit controversial. It's sparked by this podcast, the Telepathy tapes.
Ah, yes. Kai Dickens' podcast. It explores human telepathy, right? But with a very specific focus.
Exactly. It really zones in on experiences and claims coming from the non-speaking community.
It's quite a collection of stories Kai Dickens has pulled together there. You've got everything from, personal anecdotes about sharing thoughts.
Right, just person-to-person stuff.
Yeah, all the way to these reported tests. Successful ones, apparently, involving numbers, random words, that kind of thing.
And it's not just the individuals themselves, but parents, teachers.
Exactly. People who say they've witnessed it. And the podcast even sort of dips its toes into some early scientific angles, like QEEG brain scans.
Okay. So for this deep dive, the core questions seem to be, looking at what the telepathy tapes presents, could this actually be real? Could human telepathy be a genuine thing?
And the follow-up, obviously, is, well, if it is, what on earth does that mean for all of us? What are the implications?
Absolutely. And what the telepathy tapes does, I think really powerfully, is it gives a voice, a voice to these individuals and families who've often faced, well, skepticism is putting it mildly.
Definitely putting it mildly. For years, many non-speaking people, especially, say, those with autism, seem to have communicated in ways that hint at something deeper, maybe telepathic.
And this podcast gives them that platform, which feels crucial because these experiences often just get dismissed or unheard.
And you have to remember the context, the journey these families are on. Often the first goal is just finding any reliable way for their child to communicate.
Right, like letterboards or tech.
Exactly. So the whole telepathy idea often only comes up after those other methods are already in place. It doesn't just appear out of nowhere. It builds on that search for connection.
Okay, so let's get into some of the actual messages shared on the podcast. Kai asked a really direct question, didn't he? Like, what should listeners do with all this, with these claims?
Yeah, and Sammy, who's 25, she had this really evocative answer. She said, think of us as a ripple in the waters.
A ripple in the waters, like that. It feels like it's about challenging perceptions, shaking things up a bit.
I think that's spot on. That metaphor, it suggests disrupting, the established reality, the reality of parents, schools, and therapists, as she put it.
Which points to how hard it is to convince people who need that hard, tangible scientific proof, right?
Definitely. And her idea of telepathy being a misunderstood gift, that's a theme that keeps coming up. Like, maybe it's not weird, maybe it's just a human ability we've overlooked.
Yeah, that resonates with another message from Trevor. His mother apparently started testing him after hearing the podcast.
Oh, yeah, I remember that one. Said she got 100% accuracy, multi-digit numbers, random words, all silent communication.
Right. And Trevor's message was pretty clear. I want them to see us in a different light. I have an intelligent man with remarkable spiritual gifts. He really pushes for presumed competence.
That phrase, presumed competence, it's so important here, isn't it?
It really is.
It cuts right to the core problem, people assuming that if you can't speak easily, you must not be thinking clearly.
And the spiritual gifts part adds another dimension, too, suggesting maybe a perception beyond just the usual senses.
Then there was that message from the UK care home resident, non-speaking.
Oh, yeah, that was powerful. Feeling imprisoned by limitations, but suggesting maybe they're not under-functioning, but
Ultra-functioning, yeah. Even linking physical challenges to maybe the brain working too well, in a way. Grain matter functioning excessively well, was the phrase.
And the plea, let us lead you. That completely flips the usual script on who helps who, doesn't it?
It really does. Ultra-functioning, it's provocative. It challenges those medical models that just look for deficits. And let us lead you implies there's maybe wisdom or insight there that society's missing. A different kind of knowing.
And it wasn't just individual experiences. The podcast touched on this idea of like a shared consciousness.
Yeah. Houston
from Atlanta talked about the talk on the Hill.
Right, this sort of collective telepathic thing among non-speakers. He said, definitely all of us talk to each other, like a channel.
They all turn to this channel at a certain time and they all communicate, even if they're miles apart.
Yeah, don't have to be in the same room, same zip code.
It makes you wonder, doesn't it, about connections we just aren't aware of.
This whole idea of a shared space, the Hill, it raises huge questions about consciousness, connection. Is it a metaphor for deep empathy, or is it more literal, actual thought transfer?
Who knows? But it's fascinating to consider.
And then there's the idea of it being innate. Noah's sister, Adriana, she facilitates his communication.
Right, and she had a really interesting take. She believes every child sort of arrives with spirit eyes, able to communicate telepathically.
But then it is the trained behaviors that break those abilities that take them away from us. That's a striking thought.
Maybe we're trained out of it, that society, education somehow suppresses this natural capacity.
It makes you think, doesn't it? How much potential might we be limiting through our standard ways of raising and teaching kids? A lost ability.
And Maria, the teacher, she relayed messages from her students that connect this to, well, other kinds of experiences too.
Yeah, like communication with spirits. One student wanted to right the wrongs about how people view that, saying it's sad people get judged for being interested in spirits.
And that student apparently said, I stopped worrying about death.
That links telepathy pretty directly to spiritual or maybe even extrasensory perception.
That connection keeps popping up in these accounts, the link between telepathy and spirituality. For some, reading thoughts seems tied to insights into other realms or communicating with spirits. So if telepathy is real, maybe it opens up a much bigger view of consciousness, of existence beyond just the physical stuff we see.
It definitely points in that direction for some of these individuals.
Another of Maria's students talked about seeing auras, sensing energy.
And crucially, only connecting telepathically when feeling loving emotions.
Yes, that seems key. Love as a facilitator. That comes up again and again.
It does, which suggests it's not just like a mechanical information transfer, is it?
No, it seems tied to our emotional state, maybe even our ethics. Love, acceptance, those seem important.
One student described sending thoughts like email. I like that analogy.
Me too. And saw it as a spiritual thing with science behind how it works. Try and bridge that gap, maybe.
Yeah, sharing a part of themselves that's usually hidden. The email thing captures that directness, bypassing words and wanting to understand the science, even if we don't have it yet. That makes sense, too.
Anthony, who studied with Marianne Harrington, he had this deep wish for a world based on compassion, not fear or anger.
He believed every soul's true nature is love, right? And that even unspoken compassion changes things.
Yeah, wanting to guide people towards that. It makes you wonder if we were more aware of each other's feelings, unspoken thoughts, would things be different, more compassionate?
It's a profound idea. The potential ethical shift, the societal change, it could be massive.
Daniel's experience, shared via his mother Connie and Alex Margot, he saw facilitated communication, like spelling, as just training wheels.
Compared to telepathy, yeah. Connie described getting messages from him like everything comes in at once.
Whoa, just a flood of information.
Apparently, they still sometimes use the letterboard, kind of for confirmation.
To check, yeah.
But their main way seems to be direct thought to thought, which suggests, for some at least, it's way more efficient than speaking.
That description, everything comes in at once, it really hints at a completely different way of processing information, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And still needing that letterboard sometimes shows how hard it is to function in a world that, well, mostly doesn't accept this possibility yet.
Sammy, who gave us the ripple in the waters idea earlier, she talked about how believing can shatter people's reality bubble.
Right, letting them see past their conditioning. She connected it to a higher dimensional perspective, like their main consciousness is sort of elsewhere.
On a different plane. And she saw this moment, this discussion, as a positive thing, a chance to tear down the false reality bubble and meet the real human.
That's a pretty radical view, isn't it? Suggesting our everyday reality might just be a limited slice of what's actually going on. This higher dimensional perspective, it pushes us to think beyond our senses.
Then there was Lily from Atlanta. Very direct.
Yes, she was. Opposing spelling as a legitimate form of alternative communication needs to stop now. We need to be believed and supported.
She stressed that non-speakers are aware of everything. Everything. Even thoughts. And they just want inclusion, validation.
And her hope for humanity was tied to realizing we're all interconnected and being mindful of some kind of coming cataclysmic shift in understanding the universe.
Her message really drives home that urgency, doesn't it?
Yeah.
The need to just believe them.
That call for belief is maybe the most fundamental thing here. When she says they're aware of thoughts, it demands we presume competence. And her vision of a transformed universe, if we accept interconnectedness, it's potentially revolutionary.
John Paul, through his brother, had a simpler message, didn't he? Just love. Love is the most vital thing for the universe's survival.
And Zahari, the blind speller, asked us to simply see us as not strange and engage us as humans.
Right. Pointing out how often non-speakers are treated like children.
And he suggested maybe just assuming they can hear thoughts. That alone would be a huge step towards respect. A really clever challenge, actually.
It's a powerful reminder, like John Paul's message about love, of just basic shared humanity.
Definitely.
So thinking about all these messages, one thing really stands out, right? The power of thoughts.
Yeah, that comes through so strongly. As one person put it, our thoughts build the world. Our thoughts are heard by the world. Our thoughts are felt by the world.
Even if the words aren't said, the feeling is there. It really makes you stop and think about the influence inside our own heads.
It really does, this idea that thoughts have a tangible impact. It connects with some newer ideas about consciousness, maybe interacting with reality, and it reinforces that communication is way more than just words. Maybe we are all linked in ways we're just starting to glimpse.
Two robots talking.
Okay.
So we've just done a deep dive into the telepathy tapes, exploring all these compelling accounts.
Accounts suggesting telepathy might be real, yeah. Especially in the non-speaking community.
We've heard examples talked about that hill concept, the shared space.
The idea of it being innate, maybe lost.
Yeah.
The spiritual connection.
The call for competence, compassion, the skepticism they face.
Whether it's a unique skill, like a savant ability. The reports of two-way communication.
Now, it might be more direct for some, the politics within the spelling community.
And overarching all of it, the power of thoughts, the potential for connection beyond what we normally think of.
Yeah, it's a lot. What's really striking, I think, is how consistent some of these themes are across different people, different situations, as presented in the podcast.
Absolutely. Now, mainstream science, with its current focus on materialism, it's still very cautious, obviously.
Naturally.
But the sheer number of these stories, the richness of them, plus those little hints of scientific exploration, it really forces some big questions about consciousness, about communication.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive on two robots talking, here's something to think about. If these accounts, these stories from the telepathy tapes, if they hold real weight, what does that mean?
How would our whole understanding of connection, communication, even consciousness itself, how would that need to change, to evolve?
What possibilities might open up? Things we can't even imagine now, maybe. If we actually embrace this potential in ourselves and in others.
It's a huge question. It really invites us to rethink the boundaries of what we think is possible and maybe just approach things with a bit more curiosity, more open-mindedness.